Hello and welcome. In recent weeks, a compensation package that could potentially reach historic proportions has sparked intense debate across America about wealth, corporate governance, and the growing divide between the ultra-wealthy and ordinary workers. Today, we're examining the details of Tesla's shareholder vote that approved what could become the largest executive pay package in history, potentially making one person the world's first trillionaire, and what this means for American society. The concept of $1 trillion is so vast that most people struggle to comprehend its true scale. To put this astronomical figure into perspective, imagine a single block representing $1 billion. To reach $1 trillion, you would need exactly 1,000 of these billion-dollar blocks stacked together. The sheer magnitude becomes even clearer when we consider how long it would take to spend such wealth. If someone spent $40 every single second of every single day without stopping, it would take 289 days to exhaust just $1 billion. But to spend $1 trillion at that same rate of $40 per second around the clock would require 792.5 years. Alternatively, $1 trillion could provide every single resident of the United States with $3,000. These comparisons help illustrate just how unprecedented this level of wealth truly is. The debate surrounding this compensation package has brought American economic populism into sharp focus. During his campaign, former President Donald Trump positioned himself as a champion of working-class Americans, successfully winning over voters who traditionally felt left behind by the political establishment. Many of these voters have historically not resented the wealthy, instead seeing successful entrepreneurs as aspirational figures representing the American dream they hope to achieve themselves. This perspective holds that people who create companies, generate value, and provide employment opportunities should be rewarded for their contributions to the economy and society. Supporters of this viewpoint argue that successful entrepreneurs like Elon Musk came to America, built groundbreaking companies, and created thousands of jobs that support families and communities. They contend that Tesla and Musk's other ventures employ significant numbers of people and produce products that consumers want to purchase. From this angle, extraordinary success that lifts up employees, suppliers, and entire industries represents exactly what makes the American economic system work. The argument suggests that American workers fundamentally believe in hard work leading to advancement and prosperity, and that this belief system doesn't include resentment toward those who achieve exceptional success. However, critics present a starkly different perspective on this situation. They describe the optics as deeply problematic, particularly when contrasted with millions of Americans struggling to afford basic necessities. The image of one individual potentially receiving compensation worth $1 trillion, while government assistance programs face cuts, and millions worry about food security, creates what many see as an untenable moral contradiction. The criticism intensifies when considering that this isn't simply abstract wealth accumulation, but rather a structured incentive package designed specifically to motivate someone who already possesses more wealth than they could spend in multiple lifetimes. The structure of the compensation package itself raises philosophical questions about motivation and value. Rather than a straightforward payment, the approved package functions as a performance-based incentive tied to specific corporate milestones. This framework presumes that someone who has already accumulated unprecedented wealth requires additional financial motivation to remain focused and committed to their company's success. Critics question why someone who claims to be passionate about their work and invested in their company's mission would need $1 trillion dangled before them as motivation to avoid distraction. The underlying assumption that only astronomical financial incentives can maintain executive focus strikes many observers as revealing something troubling about contemporary corporate culture and priorities. The question of who determines appropriate compensation levels in private enterprise has become central to this debate. While companies are privately held, entities where shareholders theoretically make these decisions, The concentration of wealth and voting power means these decisions don't always reflect broad consensus. Some board members and significant shareholders themselves benefit from the company's rising stock price, creating potential conflicts of interest when evaluating executive compensation. When asked to consider whether there should be limits on private compensation, defenders of unlimited executive pay argue that free market principles should prevail without government interference. However, this position becomes complicated when considering how executive decisions impact thousands of workers and broader economic patterns. The Tesla shareholder vote did not occur in isolation, but rather against a backdrop of significant controversy surrounding the executive in question. In early 2025, Elon Musk played a prominent role in the Department of Government Efficiency initiative, which resulted in the termination of approximately 200,000 federal government positions. Reports indicate that many of these displaced workers have struggled to find new employment, particularly in the Washington area, where federal jobs represent a significant portion of the economy. The ripple effects extended nationwide as families faced financial uncertainty and career disruption. Critics emphasize that Musk isn't simply a chief executive officer running private companies, but rather someone whose decisions have directly affected hundreds of thousands of American families through government workforce reductions. The manner in which these terminations were conducted, described by some observers as gleeful and characterized by imagery of chainsaws and aggressive rhetoric, struck many as needlessly cruel. Technology journalist Kara Swisher, who has covered Silicon Valley for decades, characterized the approach as cruelty rather than joy, comparing the behavior to that of a 12-year-old with a chainsaw. She further noted that the Government Efficiency Initiative ultimately failed to achieve its stated objectives and likely cost taxpayers more than it saved. This context makes the trillion-dollar compensation discussion particularly charged. Americans watching friends and family members lose federal employment and struggle financially find it difficult to reconcile those hardships with news of historic executive compensation packages. The contrast between ordinary people facing genuine economic distress and executives negotiating compensation that exceeds the gross domestic product of many nations creates what critics describe as an obscene disparity that undermines social cohesion and faith in economic fairness. In early November of 2025, Tesla shareholders cast their votes on the proposed compensation package. Approximately 75% of voting shareholders approved the measure, which includes more than 420 million shares of Tesla stock. The approval came despite opposition from several major institutional investors, including the California Public Employees Retirement System and Norway's Sovereign Wealth Fund, which manages investments for the Norwegian people. These large, sophisticated investors expressed concerns about governance, fairness, and the precedent such a package might set for executive compensation more broadly. The package comes with significant conditions that must be met before any compensation is actually received. Tesla's market capitalization must reach $8.5 trillion, nearly 5 times its current valuation. Additionally, the company must achieve substantial operational milestones, including selling approximately 20 million electric vehicles over 10 years, and deploying what has been described as an army of 1 million humanoid robots. These targets represent extraordinary growth that would require Tesla to dramatically expand production, successfully launch entirely new product categories, and maintain market enthusiasm despite intensifying competition in the electric vehicle sector. The approval came after Musk reportedly threatened to walk away from Tesla if shareholders rejected the package. This ultimatum placed shareholders in a difficult position, essentially asking them to choose between approving historic compensation or risking the departure of the individual most associated with the company's brand and market valuation. Many analysts believe Tesla's stock price is significantly elevated above what fundamentals would justify, sustained primarily by investor belief in Musk's vision and ability to deliver revolutionary products. Without that central figure, there's widespread consensus that the stock price would decline substantially, potentially losing hundreds of billions in market value. Kara Swisher provided detailed analysis of the situation, drawing on her extensive experience covering technology companies and Silicon Valley culture. She explained that while the compensation package appears extraordinarily generous, it's structured around very specific performance requirements. Musk must not only drive the stock price to unprecedented levels, specifically between $1.4 trillion and $5 trillion before eventually exceeding $8 trillion, but also deliver concrete operational achievements. The requirement to sell 1 million robots represents a particularly ambitious target, given that Tesla has not yet brought such a product to market in any meaningful way. Swisher was particularly critical of Tesla's board of directors, describing it as the most compliant and ineffective board in the history of the technology sector. She suggested that the board functions essentially as a rubber stamp for Musk's desires, rather than providing the independent oversight and checks that corporate governance principles require. In her analysis, the board faced a straightforward calculation that Tesla's stock price is sustained not by the company's actual sales or profits, but by its status as what she called a meme stock, valued based on narrative and enthusiasm rather than traditional metrics. Without Musk, that narrative collapses, and the stock price would fall to levels reflecting the company's actual financial performance. The compensation package approval process revealed tensions between different types of shareholders. Retail investors, often deeply enthusiastic about Tesla, and Musk personally, generally supported the package. Many of these individual investors view Musk as a visionary whose ambitious goals justify exceptional rewards. Institutional investors, who manage money on behalf of pension funds, endowments, and ordinary savers, were more skeptical. These professional investors expressed concerns about precedent, governance standards, and whether such compensation truly serves shareholder interests or primarily benefits the executive. Tesla's recent sales performance and market position add complexity to the compensation discussion. Sales have declined in several key markets, with particularly steep drops in European countries. Reports indicate that Tesla sales in Germany fell by approximately 50%, reflecting both increased competition from established automakers launching electric vehicles and growing consumer concern about the company's public image. The phenomenon of Tesla owners placing bumper stickers on their vehicles, reading messages like, "I bought this before Elon went crazy," illustrates how the chief executive's public persona and political activities have affected the brand's appeal to certain customer segments. Swisher and other analysts note that Tesla faces innovation challenges that go beyond political controversies. The company's most recent major product launch, the Cybertruck, has been widely criticized as potentially the worst product rollout in the company's history. The vehicle faced years of delays, significant production challenges, quality concerns, and pricing that evolved substantially from initial promises. Many early reservation holders canceled their orders, and the Cybertruck has become something of a punchline rather than the revolutionary product initially promised. Beyond the Cybertruck, Tesla has repeatedly announced ambitious products that have not materialized. For years, the company has promised fully autonomous self-driving capability, with Musk at various points claiming this technology was just months away. Those promises have not been fulfilled, and regulatory scrutiny of Tesla's driver assistance systems has intensified. Similarly, plans for a robo-taxi service, an affordable mass-market electric vehicle, and various other products have been announced, but not delivered. This pattern of overpromising and underdelivering has made some investors and analysts more skeptical about the latest ambitious targets tied to the compensation package. The requirement to deploy 1 million humanoid robots represents perhaps the most speculative element of the compensation package conditions. While Tesla has demonstrated prototype robots at events, these demonstrations have been criticized as essentially theatrical rather than showing genuinely functional autonomous machines ready for practical deployment. Developing robots capable of performing useful work in real-world environments represents an enormously complex challenge that numerous well-funded companies and research institutions have struggled with for decades. The target of 1 million such robots within the compensation package timeframe strikes many experts as wildly optimistic, if not entirely unrealistic. Examining this compensation package in historical context reveals its truly unprecedented nature. The Guinness World Records Organization tracks such matters and has documented that John D. Rockefeller's wealth at its peak would equal approximately $630 billion in current value, making him often cited as the wealthiest person in history when adjusted for inflation. Current estimates place Musk's wealth at approximately $493 billion, making him the wealthiest person in the world today. If Tesla achieves the targets outlined in the compensation package, and Musk receives the full value of the stock grants, he could potentially cross the $1 trillion threshold, becoming the first trillionaire in human history. The concentration of such wealth in a single individual raises questions that extend beyond simple envy or resentment. Economic research suggests that extreme wealth concentration can have broader social implications, affecting everything from political influence to innovation dynamics to social mobility. When single individuals command resources equivalent to the budgets of significant nations, their personal preferences and decisions can shape markets, technologies, and even government policies in ways that may not align with broader public interests. The concern isn't necessarily that any individual achieved success, but rather that the scale of that success has reached proportions that potentially distort democratic processes and economic competition. Political figures across the spectrum have responded to this compensation package and the broader questions it raises. Senator Bernie Sanders, who has built his political career around addressing economic inequality, has been particularly vocal in describing the situation as emblematic of oligarchic tendencies in American society. He argues that a small number of individuals have accumulated wealth and power that fundamentally undermines democratic governance and economic fairness. From this perspective, whether someone technically earned their wealth through creating companies matters less than the social and political consequences of such extreme concentration. Defenders of the current system counter that wealth creation through entrepreneurship fundamentally differs from wealth accumulated through inheritance, political corruption, or monopolistic practices. They argue that Musk built companies that produce products millions of people voluntarily choose to purchase, and that this market validation justifies his compensation. The companies employ thousands of workers who earn salaries and benefits, generate tax revenue for governments, and advance technologies that may benefit society broadly. From this view, efforts to limit entrepreneurial rewards would discourage exactly the kind of innovation and risk-taking that drives economic progress and improves living standards. The debate also touches on questions of corporate governance and shareholder democracy. In theory, shareholders collectively own companies and elect boards of directors to represent their interests in overseeing management. In practice, however, various factors can complicate this idealized model. Many shares are held by index funds and other institutional investors who may not actively engage in governance decisions. Retail investors often lack the information, expertise, and coordination to effectively influence corporate decisions. Meanwhile, executives and founders may control significant voting power through share structure or influence board nominations, creating situations where oversight becomes largely ceremonial. Tesla's governance has faced criticism beyond just this compensation package. The board includes individuals with personal and business relationships with Musk, raising questions about independence. Some directors have received separate compensation or business opportunities through connections with Musk's other ventures, potentially creating conflicts of interest. When boards lack truly independent members willing to challenge executive proposals, the check and balance function that corporate governance is meant to provide breaks down. Critics argue that the compensation package approval represents a failure of this governance system, rather than a legitimate exercise of shareholder democracy. The discussion around this compensation package intersects with broader debates about American capitalism and its evolution. Some observers argue that the United States has transitioned from an entrepreneurial capitalism where rewards flowed to those who built better products and services, to a form of financial capitalism where wealth increasingly comes from manipulating stock prices, tax strategies, and financial engineering. From this perspective, Tesla's valuation bearing little relationship to its actual vehicle sales and profits, sustained instead by narrative and market enthusiasm, exemplifies this shift. The compensation package rewards not necessarily building a great car company, but rather maintaining the story that sustains an inflated stock price. Others reject this characterization, arguing that innovation necessarily involves risk and uncertainty that can make companies difficult to value using traditional metrics. They point out that Amazon traded at seemingly absurd valuations for years, while building infrastructure and capabilities that eventually generated massive profits, vindicating investor faith. Similarly, they argue, Tesla is building not just a car company, but an energy and artificial intelligence company whose full value may only become apparent over time. Extraordinary potential justifies extraordinary valuation and extraordinary rewards for the leadership driving toward that potential. The compensation package debate also reflects changing attitudes about wealth and success across different generational and demographic groups. Polling data suggests that younger Americans express more concern about economic inequality and more support for policies that would redistribute wealth than older generations. This shift may reflect different economic experiences, with younger workers facing higher housing costs, student debt burdens, and less job security than previous generations enjoyed. When economic mobility feels less attainable, the argument that everyone should celebrate billionaire success because they too might achieve it someday rings hollow for many. Looking forward, the Tesla compensation package may set precedents that extend far beyond one company or one executive. If shareholders approve such extraordinary compensation tied to ambitious targets, other executives and boards may pursue similar arrangements. This could accelerate a trend where executive compensation becomes increasingly disconnected from typical worker wages, further widening the gap between those at the top of organizations and everyone else. Critics worry this pattern undermines social cohesion and economic stability, while defenders argue that star executives deserve rewards commensurate with the value they create. The global dimension of this discussion also merits attention. While executive compensation debates are particularly intense in the United States, other developed economies generally feature much lower pay ratios between top executives and average workers. European and Asian companies typically compensate executives at levels that, while certainly generous, rarely approach American extremes. These different approaches reflect varying cultural values about appropriate inequality levels, different corporate governance structures, and different social safety nets that reduce winner-take-all dynamics. As this story continues to develop, several key questions remain unresolved. Most fundamentally, will Tesla actually achieve the ambitious targets that would trigger the full compensation package? The company must nearly quintuple its market value while simultaneously delivering products it has never successfully brought to market. Competition in electric vehicles continues intensifying, with virtually every major automaker now offering multiple electric models. Chinese manufacturers are producing high-quality electric vehicles at price points Tesla struggles to match. Self-driving technology remains frustratingly difficult despite years of promises that it was nearly solved. Against these headwinds, reaching the required milestones represents an enormous challenge. Public opinion around wealth concentration and executive compensation may also shift as economic conditions evolve. If the economy enters recession, unemployment rises, and financial stress increases for ordinary families. tolerance for extreme executive compensation may decline. Conversely, if conditions improve and wages grow broadly, concerns about inequality might diminish. Political outcomes will also matter, as different administrations and congressional compositions might pursue various policies affecting wealth taxation, corporate governance requirements, and executive compensation disclosure rules. The conversation surrounding this compensation package ultimately reflects fundamental questions about values, fairness, and the kind of society Americans want to build. Reasonable people can disagree about whether extraordinary wealth represents admirable achievement that should be celebrated or dangerous concentration that threatens democratic governance. They can debate whether current systems appropriately reward value creation or have been captured by insiders who extract wealth without equivalent contribution. They can consider whether the American dream of upward mobility remains accessible or has become increasingly confined to a fortunate few. What seems clear is that these debates will continue intensifying as wealth concentration increases, and its implications become more apparent. The approval of a potential trillion-dollar compensation package represents a significant milestone in this ongoing discussion, crystallizing concerns and arguments that had previously remained somewhat abstract. Whether this moment leads to meaningful changes in corporate governance, compensation practices, or wealth distribution policies remains to be seen. For now, it stands as a vivid illustration of the tensions at the heart of contemporary American capitalism and the unresolved questions about how to balance innovation incentives with broader social concerns. Thank you for watching.